So, first of these research findings, what the researchers discovered after the 5 weeks of practice was a decrease in the production and an increase in the clearance of Alzheimer's-related proteins. So as you may know, there's these things called tau tangles. There's the other things called beta amyloid plaques. Now, these are basically toxic proteins, and they are very widely recognized hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease. Some people think they're a cause, other people think they're a kind of an effect or a middleman. No one really knows, but basically what we know is that they are hallmarks, or everyone agrees that they're hallmarks of Alzheimer's. And what the researchers wanted to know was whether this slow-paced breathing using biofeedback, where you're either increasing oscillations or decreasing them, they theorized that would stimulate the vagus nerve pathways and would counter stress, so reduce stress, and the arousal pathways, basically, that could influence the production and the clearance of the taus and the beta amyloids. So they had, in this case, 108 healthy adults, 54 were younger, so the 18 to 35s, 54 were older, 55 to 80. They were randomized into these two groups, either increase or decrease the oscillations, increase coherence or decrease coherence. And in this case, so they did 4 weeks of the heart rate variability biofeedback practice. So they're using the technology to do that, and they're practicing, remember, to start with for 20 minutes a day, towards the end, 40 minutes a day. And what the findings showed was that the group who increased their oscillations, increased their coherence, they decreased the production and increased the clearance of the plasma amyloid beta levels and the tau levels. And this effect was seen in both the younger adults and the older adults. So what does that mean? What's the takeaway from all of this? Well, if we know that these levels of amyloids and taus are hallmarks of dementia and Alzheimer's, we know that this coherence breathwork with the biofeedback decreased the production and increased the clearance of those toxins then, and that was seen in both younger and older adults. And clearly it suggests that coherence practice is something that could be done throughout life to try and keep these levels of taus and amyloids lower. So we didn't see this in the other group, even though the other group actually were calming themselves down, relaxing themselves. This other group didn't have these large oscillations. They weren't highly coherent. So this is interesting because, yeah, it means that a simple practice has the potential to keep these levels lower and therefore has the potential to be protective. Second piece of research then, the findings here were an increase in the cortical volume and the coordination of those areas as well, and an increase in emotion regulation. So we know, again, that dementia, inclusive of Alzheimer's, causes damage to the frontal lobes, the prefrontal cortex and the associated areas as well, the cortex. And what that means is it can make it difficult and increasingly difficult as the disease progresses to regulate emotions. Also makes it very difficult to regulate thoughts and think clearly, to regulate behaviors, as well as to do things like, to focus on tasks or switch between tasks, multitask, or even things like feel motivated to want to do things. So we know that these are problems when we have damage to those frontal lobes. So in this case, we had the same size group again, it's the same group. So 162 adults, 106 younger, 56 older, randomized again, and they're doing this practice where they're increasing or decreasing their heart rate oscillations at coherence. And what the neuroimaging revealed, so they were comparing neuroimaging before, during, and after. This revealed changes to the volume and also, interestingly, to the resting state connectivity of the networks involved in both emotion regulation and interoception. So what I mean by that is that not while people were practicing, but when they were in their resting state, the connectivity was improved. There was something about this practice that improved the connectivity of those networks, which are important for controlling your emotions, and also important in terms of interoception, which is this awareness of the information in the body, which then can provide you with an opportunity to respond, react, regulate. And so, unsurprisingly, then this also revealed an improved ability to what the authors call tune down brain and physiological responses to negative stimuli. So they had an assessment where they had to basically, try to tune down their responses to negative imagery whilst being measured using neuroimaging. And we saw then that those people who had been increasing their coherence were able to do that much more effectively. Again, that was seen in both the younger and the older adults. So again, it would suggest that this is something that is useful to do, throughout their lifetime. So what's the takeaway here then? Well, these frequent negative thoughts and emotions that many of us experience and often experienced in later life when health declines, they're associated with cognitive decline. They're associated also with the increased levels of the toxic proteins, the taus and the amyloids, which we know are the hallmarks of Alzheimer's. We know that there's greater cortical volume and greater cortical coordination supports higher heart rate variability. And we know that higher heart rate variability is also associated with experiencing of more frequent positive emotions and better emotion regulation. So this becomes like a virtuous cycle. As you practice, you get these benefits. And so again, coherence breathing with the HRV biofeedback can increase the cortical volume and coordination. It can increase HRV and improve emotion regulation. And then the third of these findings then, which as I mentioned is in preprint, should be published fairly shortly, hopefully. What this shows is that we know again that progressive shrinkage of the hippocampus, particular part of the brain called the hippocampus, which is responsible for, one of the things it's responsible for is memories. That's a hallmark of Alzheimer's. It's one of the reasons why people, lose their memories or their ability to remember and recall things with Alzheimer's. So here what we had was 162 adults, 106 younger, 56 older. They're randomized. They're completing again 5 weeks of the practice. And what we saw was in the older adults, the group who engaged in the coherence practice actually showed increased hippocampal volume. So the hippocampus actually increased in size. And when we drilled down into the data, or the researchers rather drilled down into data, not me, what they found was that the older adults who had what's called a greater average spectral power of the heart rate around 0.1 hertz is a frequency. What that means basically is those who had a higher coherence, measurably higher level of coherence, that correlated with even greater increases in volume. So the higher level of coherence, the greater the increases in the volume of the hippocampus. And there was no change in the younger adults. So why is that? Well, almost certainly it's because their hippocampus hadn't started to shrink yet. It's something that happens with age. So interesting that the older adults were able to, basically increase the volume of the hippocampus. So what's the takeaway here? Well, we know that the shrinkage of the hippocampus is associated with that premature aging. It's a hallmark of Alzheimer's. We know that coherence breathing with biofeedback can increase the volume.